head into the Ringerverse to stay up to date with all things superheroes and nerd culture entertainment. Hosted by a rotating lineup of superfans at The Ringer, including Mallory Rubin and Van Lathan, shows will provide instant reactions to blockbuster releases, insightful backstories on canon, and mind-bending theories, as well as fresh takes on the latest news and rumors. Check out The Ringerverse on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, you're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago. I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, I've always got a spare Boy Genius ticket for him. It's Andy Greenwald!
Don't get me in trouble. I'm going to go down the Mare of Easttown indie rock rabbit hole.
Are you really?
I don't think people want that from us. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Oh, people want us to stick to just the facts, ma'am?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they just want the Law and Order version of this cop show. They don't want to know how big this gets in the Pitchfork BNM community.
Say no more, Andy. We'll stick to the facts. Today we are going to talk about Mare of Easttown episode 3, and we're also going to go over a couple of other things that have popped up in the news over the weekend. Let's do our perfunctory throat clearing first. Andy, how are you? How was your weekend?
Perfunctory?
It's not perfunctory, but I think that, you and I are in pretty close contact, so this is more of a performative element of our friendship, right?
I don't hold anything back. I mean, do people think I have more content that I don't share? This is me, man. No, I mean, I went for a run and I tried Flamin' Cheetos ice cream. That's my weekend.
I saw that on your Instagram story. Yeah. How was that? Flamin' Cheetos ice cream.
First of all, shouts to Scoops. Best ice cream in Los Angeles, I think.
You're not really much of a dessert guy, I thought.
I don't like ice cream, but I realized I like Scoops ice cream. I think they make the best kinds. They always have new flavors, keep you guessing. I like the consistency. It's good stuff. I enjoyed a cone. And I don't want to just be like, a keyboard jockey here. I don't want people to think that I went in, perused the list of dozen flavors and was like, give me the one based on a spicy corn snack that's clearly here as a gimmick. I was like, sir, what a fascinating concoction. Too bad we don't do taste tests anymore in the age of COVID. Mm-hmm. So, because I would have tasted that for sure. But instead, give me a scoop of your finest cherry yuzu honey ice cream, which is very on brand. But then the guy was like, look, I'd love you to try it. I'm going to put a little baby hat of Flamin' Cheetos on. I was like, is that a good match with cherries and yuzus? Doesn't matter. Delicious.
Okay.
A great ice cream. I recommend it. But that's as high as it got.
My weekend was mostly dedicated to doing one of the weirder watching experiments that I have done in a long time. And I don't know if I'd recommend this to anyone, but I thought this would be a fun place for us to start. So about a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you saw that there was a lot of headlines about the For All Mankind season 2 finale.
I sure did.
People were invoking Battle of the Bastards. People were like, that was lunacy. That was so crazy. That was so good. That was the show made the leap. And I was just like, you pulled me back in For All Mankind. I'd watched the first few episodes of this first season, and I was just like, I can't remember what else was going on in my life at that point where I felt inundated with test pilot content for some reason.
I felt had a whole bit. You were like, I'm not going to space anymore.
Well,
I'm
it was
good.
more just like, I'm not going to start at zero. You know what I mean? Like, I think
I
also
think you
this
were
was
watching The Right Stuff remake.
I was watching The Right Stuff remake. For All Mankind was on. I feel like I was just like, you know what? I got it. These guys were the best and the brightest. They flew
Also,
fast.
weirdly,
They flew high.
This might have gotten lost in the pandemic, but people might not remember that you were single-handedly spearheading the Save Avenue 5 campaign at that time as well. You had a giant billboard devoted to all our favorite Avenue 5 characters like Hugh Laurie and the other guys, right?
Yes. So yeah, I was still just like guarding the Orville until the cows came up. No, look. So this is one of those strange things that I felt like quickly once I'm kind of tapped out on the first few episodes for All Mankind. Then the second season comes. Positive reviews, people talking about how it made the leap. Like people like were just like, this show has really like gone to different places. And there is a sensation that I think you can have as a viewer these days where it feels like a show has left the harbor without you. And I just had this experience even today, kind of reading a little bit about the new season of Handmaid's Tale. And I was like, so all of that's happened since the last time I've watched Handmaid's Tale. And I don't really plan on going back to Handmaid's Tale, so I didn't mind having a bunch of the stuff spoiled. But when you read what happens in a show in between the 2 or 3 seasons you haven't been watching, it truly is like a psychedelic experience. If you just read like the plot breakdown of 2 seasons of Handmaid's Tale, you're just like, what planet am I on, basically?
Who was the actor last year who was on a wellness retreat and cleanse when the pandemic started and came back and was like, what the fuck?
I don't know. Who was it?
There was some.
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya.
It's so perfect that it's Leto.
So anyway, like I just wanted to see like what the hubbub was about was For All Mankind, but I personally decided not to dedicate 17 hours of catching up with season 1 and then watching season 2. Okay. I basically skimmed season 1 a little bit. Like I noticed that there were a few particular episodes that I needed to maybe catch. But for the most part, I basically read about it and then I started season 2. I was telling Michael Bauman, who is the Ringer's resident For All Mankind fan, about this. And he was like, that's crazy, but let me know how it goes. I think I watched season 2 in about 4 days cumulatively. I just had some free time. So I just let episodes rock. And it's fucking good, man. It's like a really, really, really good show. The space stuff especially is just like a cut above more or less anything I've seen on TV before, like in terms of that kind of sci-fi stuff, maybe since Battlestar, which makes sense with Ronald D. Moore working on both. But there was this feeling I got when I got to the end of it, which I won't spoil for people who haven't seen it. Maybe Bauman can come and chat with me about it at some point, where I'm trying to get my to articulate this, and maybe you can help me with this a little bit.
Okay.
So it's essentially about like, a lot of the shows that you and I have talked about, I'm sure we get very immersed in the plot. Like when we talk about The Bureau or when we've talked about like Dark before.
Yeah.
Like we can really get lost in the sauce of like, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And that's kind of like the way these shows are told, where almost 99% of the screen is dedicated to this sort of yards gained of plot. Like it just is really more about plot than it is maybe story, where I feel like even when you watch, say, Saul, which is plotted to within an inch of its life, like everything in that Breaking Bad style works like you used to say, like a beautiful watch. But there is like a thematic kind of heaviness to it and an atmospheric feeling to it. And the character depth, it goes in different directions so that you are kind of attracted to the fact that like Saul and Kim just eat Thai food together. Like you get lost in these details. I never really necessarily felt that way with For All Mankind. I definitely felt like every single scene was either about reinforcing the ideas of the show, like the sort of themes of the show about exploration and about like, pushing the boundaries. And then all the dialogue was essentially like, we need to go to this space station to do this thing, but here is the obstacle, and I wish I could give it a name. I wish I could name, because I think it's something that when you find yourself into these shows, but having a hard time explaining to other people, like, here's the case for why you should watch it. It's not going to change your life kind of show, but it is a show that like is actually a really rewarding viewing experience. And it almost feels very old school. Am I just like going off into circles, or do you understand what I'm saying? No,
I understand you, but I feel like you're at the end there. It seemed like you were saying two different things, because I think that there are look, we're basically just enjoying a return to long form series building. I think that's part of what's fueling our adoration of Le Bureau, and why we're so excited to be talking about that on a special podcast. I think that it's also something that I think I'll circle back to when we start talking about Mare of Easttown today, which is generally my enjoyment of TV. And not everyone is like this. Everyone enjoys TV in different ways. But my enjoyment of drama series tends to be plot is the thing that happens in the background while we're getting to know the friends we're meeting along the way. I don't watch shows to answer questions or to find out what happens. And generally, my richest enjoyment in a show like even Better Call Saul, which, as you point out, is so heavily plotted, is the thing I take away from it is that for the majority of the 40 to 50 minutes, I know there's an objective, an overall objective, not just for the series, but particularly for that episode. Jimmy has to get out of the desert, or we have to, Lalo can't find out that X, Y, or Z thing is going to happen. But you're so enraptured and delighted and connected to the minute by minute story, the dialogue, the vibe, the character interactions, the jokes, that's where you're living. So much so that when the episode ends, it takes your breath away because you weren't prepared for it. You weren't looking at the destination. And so when you were describing your enjoyment of For All Mankind, I thought you were saying that. But then there was the other thread through your commentary, which suggested that on that level, maybe the show came up a little bit short. Because you said that the scene work, scene to scene, character to character, felt more prosaic.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think one thing that was refreshing about this show, and Moore has talked about this in interviews, is that it's not a mystery box show. Like, for as much as there are revelations and twists and I think very brave moments, and one thing that's very cool about it is that I think they have basically a 7-season arc for the show, and they, I think, have been renewed through 4. So this idea is that it's like a generational story, and that the cast will essentially cycle out. Like, they are going to have probably an all different cast by the end of the series that they did when they started it.
We should do that for podcasts. By the
we
way.
should. I mean, I've been working with some of our replacements, and I think that there's a lot of potential there. But I think that there is something refreshing about the fact that I'm not watching something to solve it, like you're talking about. Like, and even Mare has like a central mystery, and even Mare dedicates a pretty big part of its pie to. Could it be Frank, or could it be the Deacon, or is this guy looking a little shifty this week? And that doesn't necessarily happen with For All Mankind. There is a lot of like, holy shit, will like this guy nuke the moon? But there's
you had my interest. Now you have my attention.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's not. Will we get into space, or like it doesn't start with some war on this other planet and wonder how we got there.
I'm thrilled that you've discovered the show and are enjoying it. And I would like to join you. I'll also say that I'd be interested in serving as you just did, as a test case for a theory that I was pushing for a while when I was a TV critic, which is, find your own way into stuff.
Yeah.
There were a number of shows that there did seem to be a higher than usual barrier for entry for some people. The Leftovers was one. Halt and Catch Fire was another. Both shows now, in retrospect, have become absolutely adored, beloved series. But at the time, I think that even, you know what? I don't even say at the time. The first season of Leftovers is contentious. Some people adore it. Some people don't. People know that I think 2 and 3 are absolute God-level TV, and I thought 1 was challenging at times. Mm-hmm. Halt and Catch Fire, I think even the people who have discovered that show and now truly adore what a gem that it was, thanks to it, now that it's on Netflix, more and more people are putting themselves in that category. The first season isn't a struggle to watch, but it is that you see and feel the show struggling to figure out what it's going to be, and it's incredible then what it becomes. I would say, I know this might be heresy in some quarters, but like, watch the stuff how you want. And the thing is, if you enter with season 2, season 1 still exists, and you might enjoy it and appreciate it in a different way now that you know that you're committed and that you're all in. It could expand or complicate your experience. So I don't know. I'd like to think that just with the sheer volume of stuff we have, that you have to do it one way or you're robbing yourself of X, Y, or Z experience might be going out the window. But I'm curious with this one because, like you, I watched the beginning of For All Mankind and I thought it was just expertly made and gripping and beautiful TV, which is hard to do. Mm-hmm. But it exceptional enough to for me to continue the ride, because the beginning, and I think this is part of the construction of the show, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it starts from a familiar place.
It's very much the
on every level.
Yeah, it's essentially like it starts and it is the right stuff until there is this huge break with our accepted timeline that we have here in reality. And it's like, well, what if this had happened? What if the Russians had beaten us to the moon? What if then the Russians put a woman in space, thus prompting Nixon to speed women into NASA and elevate them to the point where by the end of season 2, women basically run NASA. And it's like a really fascinating trip through that, but it's also about, like, I kind of like the optimism of it. And I mean, just on a technical level, it's just made incredibly well. But your point is well taken. Like, I think that, and this segues into the next thing I think we're going to talk about before we get to Mare. There is a consequence of the dominance of superhero and specifically comic book stuff becoming the coin of the realm, essentially, because I think it demands such an intense scholarship to follow. Mm-hmm. And it asks you can casually follow Marvel stuff. I don't know how rewarding it is to just sort of be like, oh yeah, I skipped 2 movies and watched 4 episodes of Wanda and then like really dug into to Falcon and Winter Soldier. I don't know if that could possibly work, but because it asks you to be on top of so much, not only what you're watching, but what came before and what will come after. And that's what cumulatively builds into this experience. We kind of have lost sight of how people used to watch TV, which is a little bit more piecemeal.
Yeah, piecemeal, and I think
at their own pace.
That's exactly right. I think the pace, and I do think we're headed towards that place. And one of the, we should say this because we do like to cover things from all angles of the industry. Apple can afford to wait. Apple, I think, feels really good about the show, very excited about where it's going. They must be thrilled that it is now achieving, some critical recognition, particularly from Chris Ryan on the podcast.
Yeah.
But more broadly, they are in a position that, that few other companies are, where they can just keep spending a ton of money on this show, waiting for the audience to find it. It's going to be there for them to find. And that also then, in turn, might play into people's confidence and commitment, confidence in making the commitment to the show. Yeah. Knowing that if I think they're probably in beginning production of season 3 now, but you can get into the show season 1 or 2, or do 2 then 1, get freaky, whatever. There's going to be a bunch more seasons. So that it's interesting. It'll be cool to watch. I will try to catch up to you.
So speaking of Marvel, we should talk about like this video that was released, I guess today, which is essentially a kind of hybrid welcome back to the movies / here's phase 4, right? Here's what's coming up in the next 2 years. I think up through summer of 23, they have plotted out. And we get to see our first sort of glimpses of a few newer films from, especially the Eternals, I think is the one that grabbed everybody's attention. But Black Widow, Shang-Chi, the Eternals, I think the Doctor Strange sequel, I think the new Ant-Man.
Yeah, the official release dates and titles for, we already knew the Spider-Man and Doctor Strange movies, but the Ant-Man threequel, as they say, and the Captain Marvel sequel, which I think is kind of interesting, and the Black Panther sequel.
And yeah, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and then I think Captain Marvel 2 is essentially called The Marvels, right?
Yeah, which is interesting. I want to come to that.
Okay, so hit me with your thoughts, because I did not expect you to get absolutely like emotional over Marvel
Chris,
Spawn.
I am not a synthezoid. Okay,
yeah,
I was not created out of one of Thanos's Infinity Stones.
But we just spent. But we did just spend the last like 2 months being like, are we sure this is good?
Look, I am a human being, and for example, yesterday I was sitting on my couch looking at a book, but the TV had been left on, and it was just a screensaver from my Apple TV. And it was a stunning drone shot of San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. And I just stared at it slack-jawed for 5.5 minutes. I was like, man, that's a beautiful bridge. You know what I mean? Like, had no story, had no connection to my life. But I was like, man, look at the color of the water. Incredible. Like, it was just one of those moments.
Just a plastic bag floating in the air.
It's just a video from my mentally ill elder brother of his feet in the sand. Shout out to the Mare of Easttown episode we're about to talk about. So what I mean to say is broad strokes aimed directly at the feeling centers of us work on me. And Marvel, I think, as evidenced by the, again, we talked about these ad infinitum for weeks, and we will. Both these shows, WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, were huge successes, I think, by almost every metric. But the way we covered them, the way we felt about them, there were a lot of growing pains as they sought to figure out how they tell their stories and their universe on a different medium. It is a giant storytelling machine that is aimed at giant gestures, and in some ways, I mean, this is true for a lot of action movies, but the broadest gestures, the trailers, are more successful than the 2-hour films because it's just the jaw-dropping, heart-tugging moments. So all this is to say, they really know how to put this thing together. They got Stan Lee's voice talking about how we're all one people, which, as someone who not just grew up reading Marvel Comics, but had like a flexi disc of like the Adventures of Spider-Man narrated by Stan Lee, that's going to get me. And it's a reminder, we were talking about the Oscars last week, and I was like, I have a very complicated relationship with movies, need every year to be like, we're movies. Remember movies?
Yes.
This was that, but successful, where they were like, hey, remember what we did? Where we took 200 random characters and then made you go ape shit when they walked out of portals to fight Josh Brolin. I was like, that's incredible that they did that, because we're lost in the
like
weeds.
One of the people like cheering when that happened?
Didn't I see it with you?
Did you?
Didn't I see it quietly next to you at the Vista at like 6 p.m.?
No, that was we saw Captain Marvel together, and I think,
I saw it.
I think I fell asleep on your shoulder.
But I was like, the cat's an alien, wake up. No, I did not stand up and cheer, but it got me. I mean, it's a beautifully staged moment. And so all that was to say that plus the like, we're going to do this again. We're going to have life back again. It's Monday morning. I don't know. It absolutely worked for me. And then because my fandom of the Marvel stuff isn't just talking about it, in terms of its role in the industry and how the machine works, I'm curious what they're going to do next. I think a lot of us thought that the missing pieces of Phase 4 would be whatever the next Avengers incarnation is, whether it's literally another movie called Avengers, but with a different team, or is something taking the place of it, or what it's going to be. Of course, there are more shoes to drop, but as you said, the next 2 years are pretty much plotted, and there's nothing Avengers-y. I mean, all these people are Avengers, but that's not what's in the cards.
There's not a team-up movie. There's not a team.
Except something hiding at the end. So to go through the quickly, broad strokes, it was very cool and obviously very intentional that the first shot that any of us get of Chloe Zhao's The Eternals makes it seem as if the film is set in the Rider continuity. The first shot that we get to see of the movie is of Salma Hayek dressed as a Larry McMurtry character on a horse. Those of us, shout out to the Mark Maron interview with Salma Hayek, where she talks about her beautiful relationship to horses that has had, it's ebbed and flowed over the years, but seems to be flowing right now. So the film is set in familiar territory for Chloe Zhao, which is cool. And smaller things in the trailer. I mean, I'm looking for this, but there were, in the images that we saw, I think they were very specifically chosen to showcase the fact that they are not a group of actors standing in front of the Unreal gaming engine in a soundstage in Atlanta, that she did film it on location.
Well, now that Kevin Feige has discovered cinema, anything's possible, man.
What was that quote?
He was just like, it was really like, they were basically like, we saw like the Eternals footage and we were like, we didn't know you could do this in the real world.
Yeah, there's ocean waves behind rocks, and I was like, is this in camera?
Who did these special effects? It's like, no, dog, that's Big Sur.
Who do you think's the one that turned to Kevin and gave him the Morpheus in the Matrix speech, where he's just like, you've just never used your eyes before?
Scorsese.
Yeah, it was Scorsese. So, I thought that was cool and interesting. Wakanda Forever, obviously a smartly chosen name for a movie that's going to be a very emotional and also very fascinating exercise for those involved without Chadwick Boseman. And then the thing that kind of was interesting to me at the end, and there are a lot of different ways to play this, but so the Captain Marvel movie, which you and I napped through together, was, regardless of our own mild criticisms, a massive success, right? I mean, the benchmark for the success of these movies is the $1 billion threshold. That crossed that. It was a $1.1 billion grosser worldwide. So there was never a question that they were going to make more. What's interesting is that they are not branding this as Captain Marvel 2. they are branding it as the Marvels and doing something that, to my knowledge, and I'm sure listeners will correct me if I'm wrong about this, has never explicitly been done in the comics, which is uniting three characters who have a connection to the name of Captain Marvel. And in this case, it's Carol Danvers, Brie Larson's character, who is Captain Marvel in the Marvel Universe. But when she reclaimed the name of Captain Marvel, one of the people she was reclaiming it from was the character that Tiona Paris played in WandaVision, who I think is now called, oh God, I'm always getting this wrong.
Spectrum or something?
Spectrum, right. I was like, which internet delivery service /
I was going to say, they should really audience test Spectrum as a name with some people in Los Angeles for the very
like,
specific...
Your new heroine, DirecTV. And Ms. Marvel, who is the Pakistani-American teen superhero who I've raved about on the show, who's going to be, I believe, introduced, although we could be wrong about that. Maybe she'll show up elsewhere, but is getting her own Disney Plus TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And Ms. Marvel was the name that Carol Danvers went by in the comics before she became fully Captain Marvel.
Gotcha.
And I think the character worships Carol Danvers. But it's basically saying kind of an ad hoc super team of these three women. And cool idea. And it's kind of thing that I'm surprised hasn't been done in the comics. The interesting thing about it, on top, I'm slightly interested. Does it seem like a demotion for Brie Larson? Like, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man gets three movies.
No more so than Iron Man being like the second fiddle in a Captain America movie was. You know what I mean? Like, I think that
but that wasn't his movie. It was still a Captain America movie.
Sure, but I think that I would say that for that character, or at least the way that they've rendered her on screen, I'm not really familiar with her in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
She could use some help. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with that. She is a god who can take down spaceships, and like, I think could use a little bit of an ensemble.
I agree. I mean, I think potentially we know nothing about this movie other than Nia DaCosta's directing it, which is very cool. Just as people who are not super fans of the first movie, it seems like a very smart course correct to be like, we're gonna have to reframe the character to have her make sense, because as you pointed out, she is an intergalactic super god basically at this point. And so what's interesting about that if she's not, doing what they're doing with Thor, which is basically making a Taika Waititi comedy. So that's interesting. I guess the other take on it would be, is that kind of just smudging and blurring of the margins of characters and the boundaries between them where we are headed because of the TV expansion, which is where everything is really just, the next thing really honestly is chapter 37 or chapter 41 or chapter 78 in the Marvel story. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's basically what we were saying about the next season, quote unquote, of Falcon and Winter Soldier. It doesn't have to be Falcon and Winter Soldier. It could be Bucky with the Dora Milaje or whomever, and that's the next season. Are the movies turning into that too? I thought that up to now the movies had been distinct chapters of these characters, but everything is getting a little blurry,
I'm curious to see to the extent to which it feels like a reset, like a hard reset, and we'll look back at the years 2018 to 23 as the same way we look back at 08 to 11 in the first couple of phases of Marvel, and that they're essentially like farming out the remaining members of like the old Marvel regime to bring along this new crew of stars, and whether, and basically test out whether or not Brie Larson can be the Hulk of the new series of films. You know what I mean? Whether or not you can have a series of films that are built around her, around Pratt, around Cumberbatch or whoever, and kind of, or even if that's an outmoded idea that you do these solo films to get to a group film that is the $1 billion one. If Captain Marvel makes $1 billion, like, do you really need to make Avengers movies?
Is this also like the period in 08 to 11 when Barack Obama brought back a lot of Clinton people, like Larry Summers to run Treasury, but maybe Janet Yellen like just needed a little extra seasoning.
That's right.
Before she could join the Marvels.
That's right.
Or whatever. Is that accurate?
I like that. Hey, before we get to Mare, can I just mention to you that did you see the stuff about this show 1899?
I want to talk about this. Yeah.
So this is very cool. A teaser went up over the weekend or just today, I think. And there's a big deadline story about it. It's this show that Netflix is making with the creators of Dark. And Dark obviously was a show that Andy and I spent a lot of time chasing our tails about over the course of 3 seasons. Speaking of shows that leave the harbor and you can feel a little bit lost. Like, I do not recommend starting Dark on season 2, by the way.
Great point. That one doesn't work for that. You got to start that one at the beginning.
But the guys who did Dark are making this new show called 1899, which has an incredible premise, which is essentially a boat that's going from Europe to the States, carrying immigrants. And it's a pan-European, cast of characters, and they're all on this boat that's heading to America, and something happens. If you look at the teaser, it's all these different languages speaking, but it's like alluding to secrets and like, what is that in the water and all this stuff. So I think that the guys say, if you like Dark, I think to expect something like that from us. And great premise. And apparently, like, the big note here is that they are using Mandalorian technology. So they have built in Germany their own Manhattan Beach style studio where you're essentially projecting landscapes and backgrounds on these LED screen walls, and you can manipulate those so that you can like track in and track out, and the landscape changes as the camera moves in and out. But it's wild to see this technology proliferating, and it'll be really interesting to see how it affects TV making going forward. I mean, they obviously made a huge investment to build this in Germany, and Netflix has made a huge commitment to international television. Dark's probably one of its big international hits in terms of the inroads it made in the States. I don't really have a lot to say about it because there hasn't been any real, I don't know any of the cast, and you can't really divine much from the trailer, but it sure looks cool. And it kind of does feel like, man, there's going to be this new vein of like blockbuster TV that seems like it's really pushing things forward technologically.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, I'm psyched that they're making another mystery box show. I know we were saying at the beginning, talking about For All Mankind, that we're happy to have some shows that aren't that, but you and I and millions of others loved shows like Lost, and I like there to be more of them. And I think I'm very happy to outsource that entertainment to the German lunatics responsible for Dark, because Dark was a hell of a good watch. It was so far up its own ass. It's insane, but it was really fun and mind-bending and just a pleasure to have. And so I'm glad they're making another show like that. That's part of it. The second thing was, I'm grateful to this story because blame me, blame my Luddism, or not taking advantage of having Sam Esmail's offers to explain it to me more. But this article in Netflix, which people can check out,
it's on
really... I'm sorry, the article about Netflix, but it was on Deadline about the show, was probably the best explainer that I've gotten about what we're talking about when we're talking about Manhattan Beach technology or Mandalorian tech. And
the Manhattan Beach Project,
Basically, and again, correct me if I'm wrong about this too, eagle-eared listeners, but previously the thing that made CGI not just expensive but slow was you would shoot the characters in front of a green screen wearing ping pong balls, and then all that footage would go to the CGI company, who would basically render stuff and digitize stuff and animate stuff and then send you schematics, and it would go back and forth, and it would just take a lot of time and money. What these new studios do is basically, instead of green screens, they are LED highest quality projection walls on all sides, and they render the landscapes in real time. So if you were standing there watching I was going to say Pedro Pascal, but he's probably getting an espresso in his trailer. But the person wearing his suit walking across Tatooine, you would see an actor in a room, but all around him is Tatooine, so it's actually happening, and you're filming it in camera. And the interesting thing about this show 1899 is that when they pitched it, it was going to be a pan-European show in all senses, not just in terms of its reach.
They were going to shoot in all these different countries. Yeah.
And then pandemic, and they couldn't. And so then it became the best test case for them to just do it all in one place. They still had to go out, though, and film the landscapes. And then not just film the landscapes and project them on the back, like a Zoom background or something. They had to film the landscapes and then digitally 3D render them so that they can be moved in and out of, and all the perspective is correct. It's incredibly complicated, and I'm probably doing a poor job explaining it. But to Kevin Feige's point of, is this in camera? You hear people say in camera. In camera means, did you just film it on the day that way? And the weird thing about the Mandalorian tech is, yes, all the stuff around it isn't really there, but you're filming it with a camera.
Yeah, and I think
you can then
my big hope is that
post and et cetera, et cetera.
I hope that it does. I would say that one of the things the Mandalorian has going for it, all jokes about Pedro Pascal working 3 days a year aside, is that I personally think you can see a difference in the performances. I think that when you ask actors to stand in front of a green screen and talk to a tennis ball that's 6 feet taller than them, and that's supposed to be Mark Ruffalo, that's going to like have one kind of performance, and you can get really, really, really good at it. You can get really good at pretending like you're talking to Thanos, even though it's not. But if you are feeling immersed in that, I mean, that's what everybody who's worked on The Mandalorian so far has said, is just like, I just fucking feels like you're in it. It feels like you're there. And I don't, there is not it's not necessarily like we've had De Niro and Raging Bull come out of Mandalorian, but like, I do feel like the performances all feel like people who are like, yes, we are in a shabby bar or on a mountaintop on this other planet. And it's pretty cool. Like, I hope, and the guys who did Dark, obviously they're just experts at building atmosphere, regardless of whether you understood Dark. It was an incredible vibe. All the Patagonia, all the Audis, all the rain, all the like time hopping. So I'm really excited for this. This is probably as pumped up as I've gotten about a show in a while.
I think to put on my very well worn hat on this podcast, which is as Martin Scorsese's surrogate, I guess the concern trolling about the rise of this technology to me is connected to, look, let me take a step back. It is in the best interest of studios and people who are writing the checks to rein in costs. Like, I get that. That's the job. It's important. But there is the great Atlantification of everything, or Torontification. Basically, when people are like, I've set this in a specific city because I know the city and it's important to the characters. And they're like, great, you're filming in Atlanta.
Yes.
And then everything kind of looks like Atlanta. In respect to Atlanta, but it doesn't look like New York. Neither does Toronto. It looks like its own place, which is fine. But there already was a push toward that, and I don't know if it's better or worse to say, well, okay, you wanted to go. At what point does it stop being, I know you wanted to go to Endor, but we don't have the light speed capability, so we're going to do it at Manhattan Beach.
Yeah, right.
Versus, I know you wanted to go to New York. I know you wanted to go to Manhattan, but we don't want to shoot there. The tax breaks aren't great. So you're going to Manhattan Beach.
Well, I don't know.
And it's going to be digital New York.
Yeah. I mean, look, Martin Scorsese is also the person who was just like, rather than getting a young actor who maybe looks a little like Robert De Niro, I'll just make Robert De Niro a young actor. So different strokes for different folks. Everybody plays with tools in a different way. I am struggling to understand why Killers of the Flower Moon apparently will cost $200 million. Maybe he's recreating certain things with LED projection for that movie. Like Scorsese is that, I don't understand. So yeah, I it'll be weird if we ever just decide that we're going to make Serpico with LED screens instead of like shooting in Queens. But like, so like, I'm definitely interested in checking it out.
Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, what's the guy who did, The Most Violent Year? J.C. Chandor.
J.C. Chandor,
right? Triple Frontier. So, just as a thought exercise, what would J.C. Chandor's budget for Killers of the Flower Moon be? I don't think it's. I mean, there might be.
Honestly, don't even know if it gets made, but yeah,
it probably doesn't get made
because you need to get Leonardo DiCaprio and De Niro to be involved.
I think it's probably worth saying
and Sturgill Simpson.
The Scorsese, and Jesse Plemons, the star of the film.
Yeah,
the Scorsese premium isn't necessarily about cutting edge LED Unreal Engine rendering walls. It's, I do everything the way I want to do it, and that's time and money. Time is money in a movie set, but basically, like, I want the best of the best in every department, and I want them available for multiple takes. And we're going to not, oh, you want to do this in 20 days? We're going to do it in 65 days. So it's going to cost 3 times as much as you intended it to. And I'm Scorsese, and it's all hinges on me. So it does come from that, I think. But maybe he's doing a little stuff that's not in camera. We'll see.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do Mare of Easttown. This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. New Year's resolutions are fun the first couple of weeks. Then you kind of maybe conveniently forget about them halfway through January. No shame. It happens to us all. But this year I have a foolproof plan, at least when it comes to saving money. Just switch to Mint Mobile and you're done. Goal accomplished, because for a limited time, their wireless plans are $15 a month when you buy a 3-month plan. The great thing about Mint Mobile is there's no jaw-dropping monthly bills or unexpected overages, and all plans come with unlimited talk and text. Get this new customer offer today at mintmobile.com/watch. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Okay, we're back. Let's talk about Mare of Easttown. God damn, this show is my shit. First of all, shout out to Yingling Beer for making its long-awaited appearance on this show.
Oh no, it had been there.
It had
Easter
been?
eggs in other people's homes. They are not a Lager household. They are a Rolling Rock household. But other houses,
I had
think,
not,
including Frank's,
I had not
been in the
noticed
first
that.
2 episodes.
I had not noticed that, and this is. And I want to foster a culture of accountability, so mea culpa to that. I'm sorry. It seemed like this was the first Yingling episode. This is also the Mare is an anti-hero episode. I mean,
yes.
And who knows what the rest of the season holds. I'm not watching ahead. My sacrifice, I hope, is noted. But look, like this is the episode where Mare breaks bad. If you had any sort of misgivings about that going into it, I think that this is an incredibly dense episode with like a lot of different stuff going on. We can start in a bunch of different places, but I thought we would start with that. You and I have been watching the TV for a very long time together. We've seen our main characters do all sorts of stuff. Did you have any kind of like, oh, it's not who I thought she was feelings when it turned out that she planted smack on her daughter-in-law, I guess?
Essentially.
Yeah.
The mother of her grandson.
Yeah.
Well, no. I think that one of the things that the show has done exceptionally well is very bread and butter TV stuff that is often overlooked and hard. What I mean by that specifically is, and a credit to Kate Winslet's performance in this as well, but Mare does whatever she feels she needs to do. Always. She does not respect other people's boundaries. She does not respect other people's perception of context or appropriateness. It was one of our favorite things about the pilot when she just cannot stop haranguing her friend, who's Katie's mother, in line to be introduced for their anniversary basketball celebration.
Nor can she stop herself from going over to Frank's house during game night to accuse him of impregnating a teenager.
Quite loudly with the door open.
Yes.
I mean, that was so wild reckless, and the show doesn't flinch. Kate Winslet doesn't flinch. The cameras don't flinch. So we know that about her. And I thought that that was expertly done and appropriately done in the build up to the finale of this episode. I think where it may have not lost people, but caused some people to bump a little bit, was that it was less her action and more that we left her for a moment and it was revealed the way it was revealed.
Because we don't see her go through. All we know is her sitting at the bar drinking Rolling Rock with that bag of heroin in her hand. And then
which, by the way, I did not know what it was. I
thought it might have been pills, but the next thing we know is it's the next day and the chief comes to her house.
And I love that scene. I love I think the chief's. I wish I knew. I don't have his name in front of me. The actor. I'll familiarize myself before we talk about the show again. But I love his performance. I love him in the rain. I love the umbrella. I love the way it was delivered. So, yeah, it tracks. And I love. Look, the anti-hero is still a successful vehicle. You know what I mean? Like it can still get out on the highway and cook. I think it's just been overused or misused. And I think one of the things that makes the show such a success is that the creators, in particular, Craig Zobel, the director, and Brad Inglesby, the writer and creator, is they're not just concerned with the minutia of this part of Pennsylvania. They are making the show, I believe, aware of the larger marketplace of television and where it is at the moment. And they know that though Kate Winslet is a phenomenally talented actor capable of diversity of performances, she's a movie star, and she's often quite sympathetic in her roles because that's what makes movie stars. And so we go into it wanting to root for her. They also know that by giving us the sense of her almost Herculean challenges, I mean, it's just unfathomable how many things she has on her plate, that we feel for her and we want her to succeed in them. And so all of that leads to the kind of, the gut punch moment when you realize what's happened at the end of the episode. I think it was earned. The only thing that caused me to kind of just take a moment was that we had been so attached to her point of view for the most part. Yeah,
I had no, like sort of moral issues with like this thing. I mean, obviously I had moral issues with what the character did, but it didn't turn me off from the experience at all. I just thought it was interesting because I think, especially this happened with like The Good Wife, with like the whole Saint Alicia part, where like female leads can sometimes get sort of ordained as like these perfect characters. And it was great to see someone with so many flaws. And the thing is like you said, it is earned. You can feel the pressure and tension and stress building over the course of the 3 episodes, but especially throughout the 3rd episode, with the walls kind of closing in on her. The lack of kind of ideas about what happened to Aaron that night. They're running out of sort of plausible theories, plus just the building of this whole subplot with the grandson. And, this show still does things that we've talked about Winslet before on this level. And I think that she is a great sort of figurehead for this cast, but this cast is kind of working at like a pretty phenomenal, like we've been doing this for 10 years level. Like the scene where Gene Smart has obviously told the grandson that he might have to go live with mommy soon. And then Winslet walks back into the kitchen. Gene Smart is furiously playing an iPad game.
Ninja, I believe.
Whatever it is.
Incredible.
And that 3-way scene between Mare, her mom, and then Lori, played by Julianne Nicholson, who comes in and is like, I'm sensing a weird energy here. But it's still like, yeah, sure, I'll take a beer and hang out. Is just like, that kind of rapport is just really difficult to even articulate what's so beautiful about it. But that feels like real people. It feels like real life.
Yeah, I mean, I remain totally floored by how funny I find the show. And compelling and likable, even though if you pull back for a second and think about what you just saw, it's incredibly dark. It's black. But like the scene at the memorial, I don't know if it's not a raffle, but they're buying burgers with tickets and stuff. And the lady with the prowler is there, and the kid's looking at her, and there's just all this crosstalk and just lived in kind of just almost exhaustion with each other. The familiarity of it. It's just, I love to be there. I did also want to say, though, in terms of to comment a little bit about the structure of the show again, this was by far the most procedural cop episode to date. There was a lot of, we're going to go talk to this person and ask some questions, and go to this person and ask questions, which makes sense. This is a murder investigation show. But I was thinking specifically about how we had flagged potential Broadchurchiness in the pilot, and then really brought home after the end of the 2nd episode. For those who aren't familiar with the great British show Broadchurch, and by great, I mean the 1st season. You're on your own after that, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it was still good. But the thing that was crazy about that, and it kind of established as a precedent, was at the end of every episode, it was like, you were looking the wrong way. This guy did it. And at the beginning of the next episode,
and you would spend a week being like, I can't believe her ex-husband is this. And then it would be like, no, I'm not.
I guess what I would say is Broadchurch, like alcohol and The Simpsons, can be the solution to or the cause of all of a show's problems. And so far, through 3 episodes, what I like about the use of the Broadchurch tropes is it just keeps it moving. A lesser show would reveal the thing about Frank, or the potential story about Frank at the end of the 2nd episode, that he's the father of Aaron's baby. And then that's what the show's about. That's it. We're going to sink into this, and how the ripple effects of how horrible this is. In this show, when Lori comes over to tell her, I was like, I'm conditioned to I think, less direct form of storytelling.
You're conditioned to think that Lori's going to keep that from her for 45 minutes. Yeah.
And not just, it's just she tell her instantly before sitting down. They live across the yard from each other. So Mare's over there in 30 seconds flat. And then the brilliance of the scene is is a shot from Frank cutting back, seeing Lori sitting there.
Dude, I mean,
this all just happened.
Go wider screen than that.
Now we move on to the next thing.
Go wider than that. She should not be put on administrative leave until like the 2nd to last episode. I don't know how they, like, I can't wait to see it. And maybe there will be some sort of plot mechanism that allows her to come back to the force officially. Or, it's hard to imagine, it's a 7-episode series. It's hard to imagine her being on administrative leave for 4 episodes, working kind of extracurricularly on this case. I don't know if they're going to do maybe a time jump at all, because, possibly that could happen, but it's hard for me to fathom her being just a woman who happens to be pursuing this on her own for 4 hours.
Now, the downside, I agree. The downside of that kind of sped up Broadchurchian storytelling, does it defang things slightly? So let me put this all under the larger heading of, I just love being in this world, and I think it's brilliant. And so I don't care who did it, honestly. I mean, we'll find out. That's the beauty of it. We'll find out. I don't care. I'm not in any rush. That said, the shadowy deacon who, had a big scarlet M for maybe guilty hung on him. I can workshop that last week. So this week we find out that not only is he hiding some things, not only was he the recipient of the last phone call from Aaron, but he's also toting her Huffy in the back of his station wagon, which he disposes of. The Broadchurch the application of the Broadchurch logic suggests that while he made a sketchy phone call and had a sketchy relationship and got rid of the bike, he's probably not the killer.
He's just a stickler for clean parks.
He's just,
you know what I mean?
He's bought and sold by Big Auto. He hates bicycles.
He hates Huffies.
He hates
but that's the thing is that you're right. It's like by the logic of the way the show has been set up so far, the first 15 minutes of episode 4 should be the deacon being like, it was completely innocent. I just found her bike. I didn't know it belonged to her and threw it out. You know what I mean?
Or panicked. I didn't.
Yeah, whatever it is. And, look, you can start to see a couple of lingering reaction shots from people where you're like, this person is probably going to come back into the,
cousin guy watching,
they just lingered a little too long on him when he's just like, oh, you looking for the deacon? Like, I think he's over there. And then it's just like, he's in there. He is in the mix a little bit, but yeah, I increasingly just, it's secondary. Who did it is secondary. What I'm here for is honestly one of my favorite drunk performances that I've ever seen.
That's where I was going next. It is a instant first ballot Hall of Fame drunk performance. I'm not hearing anything
from Evan Peters. Right. So Evan Peters shows up in the second episode, and I don't even know if we spent that much time talking about his performance because it's pretty limited in the second episode. But the third episode, we get to see that he is not like the usual, I'm the young hotshot from out of town brought in to correct your mistakes and I play everything by the book. He's like a normal person. He's a real person. And he gets brought in. I love the fact that he's got the kind of faux silk shirt with the white t-shirt that you can see underneath. He's trying to kind of look slick, but he's still goes to Ridley High. He's a Ridley High graduate and stuff.
Also gotta say that if you have that much neck, if you are part giraffe like Evan Peters is, and you're in sub-zero mid-Atlantic temperatures, you got to get a scarf, buddy. You got to button that top button. You got to protect. Please move on.
So whether or not he is got anything else to him as whether or not his character has any darkness to him, because I think, they have that conversation about where he's just I just worked the case and I just kept interviewing people until something didn't make sense. And then I tracked back. But, the moment that they have in the bar, I thought was just really, really perfect. I mean, first of all, it's perfect that Mr. Brightside is playing. I thought it was great how he was just completely on the road to oblivion, but was just trying to hang on there and was sort of doing her a favor, but sort of talking about his own problems. And his breakup story was just amazing. Let me put down my bagel. It was just incredible.
I feel like for sure it was a lender's bagel. I feel like it was absolutely a frozen bagel. I think he's not getting enough credit.
Maybe in Einstein's.
Oh, you think? Is that higher class for this character at this moment?
It would just be you went and got the bagel rather than it was in a bag.
Oh, I see. And then got blindsided. I think that Winslet is deservingly getting a ton of attention. Her accent work is getting better and better as the episodes go on. Peters nails it.
Mm-hmm.
He not only nails the accent, but gets it drunk, but also his physicality of this character is phenomenal. And I got to say, I didn't have stock in Evan Peters. I think I've always enjoyed his presence in the things that I've seen him in. He was really good in my friend Scott's movie Adult World 10 years ago. He was good in those X-Men movies and was fun
in
on WandaVision. But
what a year for him.
I didn't watch the American Horror Story show, so I don't know. I didn't realize what a really cool kind of just vibey and surprising actor he is, because the physicality of the character is what sets him apart. The little ways that he's not wearing the right coat and she says, get a coat. And then when you see him again, he's proud that he got a new coat and she doesn't notice it. And he plays that without it being part of the dialogue. And then the drunk performance, overall in the show, kudos to Inglesby again, because people get fucked up on this show.
Mm-hmm.
It is not your standard TV drinking where you can just sip stuff forever and you just get smarter or wiser, or the things, your jokes get a little bit bawdier, or maybe you smash a plate. Everybody is literally the smashed plate
Yes.
once they walk into a tavern on the show. And I love it. And you rarely see people play that drunk and get away with it and get the accent and get the character. It was really cool.
So they're obviously like 85% of episode 3 is all interconnected. So, and it just feels very much like the tension from one scene gets built up into the next scene. That's why she makes the decision that she makes at the end of the episode. The seeds of distrust are starting to be sown all around town because rumors are spreading. I think we're supposed to imply the implication is like Dylan is holding DJ as baby and is starting to wonder whether or not he's the kid's father. The one thing that's sort of like existing kind of separate from all of that is the Siobhan subplot. Which we've had a lot of fun talking about Manic and Pussy for the last couple of weeks, but I did want to ask you, like, her being a documentary filmmaker and lead singer in an indie rock band, visiting Haverford College Radio, and now going to go see Boy Genius on a date. I kind of don't want this to tie back into the mystery. Like, I just want it to be like 80% of this show is this dark, fucked up detective drama, and then there's like Siobhan's coming of age story is on the side.
Follow-up questions. Where's Boy Genius playing? Are they playing at the Troc?
The Met.
Are they big enough to play Electric Factory?
She said she was going to see them at the Met. So I think that unless I'm behind on my Philadelphia venues, I don't know if that's fictional or not.
So that's fictional, but Boy Genius is real.
Yes.
We've also established, I'm sorry, I got to break out the big board, the Carrie Matheson crazy board, but now established canon that Mannequin Pussy is a band that exists in this universe.
That gets covered.
Because Siobhan's band is called Androgynous. Okay, so I think we're beginning to formulate it. The challenging thing, and this was echoed by Missy, the lead singer of Mannequin Pussy on Twitter, is that now she is plausibly a suspect. Because she exists now. So I appreciated her willingness to step forward with that.
Yes.
I agree. I think the thing that the documentary stuff is what it is, but I really appreciated the I don't even mean this as wordplay, but the coming out of Siobhan as a almost equal stakeholder in the emotional life of this larger family. It was really a crucial moment of that, and easily lost, but in the Mayor Frank confrontation on the screen porch, that Siobhan is there bearing witness to it. This is her parents, and Mayor's total disregard for Siobhan's emotional well-being in that moment about what's being said about her father. Mayor's immediate plea to, you should be on my side because I'm right, as opposed to, this should be happening, if it's going to happen at all, 1,000,000 miles away from the spot where you are. And then we get the piece of Siobhan has access to her brother in a way other people don't, and an understanding and a connection to him and his story. Then the piece, that her late, I'm too many characters, I apologize, but that Mayor's late son's partner, the mother, Carrie, is like, he hated you.
Yes.
You were a bad mother. And then she says to Sable, you were a bad mother.
Brianna Del Rosso also seemed to be saying, your son killed himself because of you,
Yeah, the son stuff is the third rail throughout this episode. Anytime anyone says it to her, her just lights go out. But I do think that it's
Richard trying to do some some really vulnerable shit with her.
Please stand by for some Richard commentary as we end this episode. But I just think it's a very smart, and I hope they see it through and do it justice. But I think building Siobhan as, we can joke about it being a side plot that we're interested in because we are, but I think that it's important to suggest that there could be one survivor from this emotional shipwreck.
Yeah, I hope she gets the fuck out of there. Like, I think that is one thing that has not really been discussed in Easttown is does anyone leave? It seems like everyone's cousins and everyone has known each other since high school, and there are 25 people who live in town.
And all the parents are super young.
Yeah, and they're doing a really good job depicting that. And I know that there are that is a real thing, but no one has gotten the Bruce Springsteen get me the hell out of here vibe yet. And Siobhan is the one who seems to be maybe I'll go make docs for the Duplass brothers and just, tour the Eastern Seaboard with Androgynous.
So we love the show. We can't wait for episode 4. If that's where you are as well, feel free to sign off. Great job, Branskys. We had a fun podcast. We'll be back on Thursday or Friday. If you're sticking around, I do have to just drop a concern bomb of a theory that's in my head that I'm worried about. And it's the only, and we have not watched ahead. I want to be clear about that at all. I don't even watch the next week on because I just,
you think it's Richard.
It's not just that it could be Richard. It's that the one thing that the broad churches of the world have taught us is watch out for the one you're taking your eye off of. And we were joking last week about Richard's book and what it's about.
Maze Landing.
Is Maze Landing about a charming rogue who dive bombs into a community and lights a match and watches it all burn? Is the secret to this show in the book? Did he know enough about how incestuous this place is that he killed someone to watch it all fall down? Is this idea too dangerous to be on the podcast? Kaya,
I thought that the
mic.
first episode suggested that he at least would not have been in town for the disappearance of Dawn's daughter, correct?
Correct, right.
So the idea that the Dawn's daughter's disappearance and Aaron's death is connected would suggest the same killer, which would, to some extent, inoculate Richard from suspicion. And Richard does seem, at least in these first few episodes, to be there mostly to draw a different side of Mare out for viewers, you know? His presence, though, is way too fucking weird to just be like, this is cool. Yeah. This is cool color. Like, he is going to be involved in this in some way. And his little reverie about when I published my book, it turned out I really loved young women being into my book. And that did not work well for my marriage and my relationship with my son. So that would suggest that he's in the cut there. I don't know, but like, I also don't, like, it would be really weird if in the 4th or 5th episode, they're like, Richard has in fact been doing like writing workshops for the teens of this town and is a serial killer.
I very much hope not. I very much hope that it is in the vein of what we were suggesting for Siobhan, which is Richard being there. He is the Bruce Springsteen album. You know, that's like, there's another way of being and doing things. I mean, the way that Kate Winslet says he's a writer is so funny. It's basically like it's like she said he's a spaceman. You know?
Yeah.
And I like him there as a reflection of, not even a reflection, a porthole window to a different world. Not necessarily a better one in all ways, but just fundamentally different. That said, first or second thing he said to her was, I don't have any bodies under my porch yet. So, look, we're asking the questions, which is what a show like this ought to be doing. You know, purely from not even purely, from a slightly cynical perspective, HBO wants a magnificent series, but they don't want a magnificent series that no one's talking about. Everyone's just like, well, that was good. They want us to be guessing.
I think that when I watched the first episode, I was like, this is incredible. They're making like a small town drama that has a murder mystery that's sort of tangentially involved in it.
Yeah.
And now I think as we go further in, I'm finding that my mystery brain is working overtime. And I'm like, every single person is a suspect. What's the possible character flaw that's going to expose them as what, like, their true nature? And we've already gone through this with Frank. We're going through it with the deacon. Obviously, we're thinking about it with Richard. It makes it harder to be like, this guy is such a cut up. You know, we'll see. Like, it's tough to see Guy Pearce doing a show to just be like, I'm going to have 3 nice dinners with Mare, and it turns out a relationship doesn't work out. Like, I think he'll have something to do with like the larger plot of the show.
One of the rules of these shows, whoever did it has to be in the first episode. That's a rule. So the killer's on the show, and we're going to find out. But to bring it all the way back, despite what I was just saying, despite my concern trolling, I just really am happy to be along for the ride. That is not where my brain is generally, and I'm looking forward to the next episode.
All right. Well,
as you should too, listeners, the next episode of the Watch Podcast. How's that?
We can wrap it up there. We're going to be back later this week for Top Chef, and I'll also have an interview with Mythic Quest's Rob McElhenney on that day.
Nice.
So that will be cool. Stay tuned to that. And then next week, I guess, we will have episode 2 of our Bureau series.
We will?
Well, we have to. It's 2 weeks. I said we'd go every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, but listeners should know, Chris and his wife have been dragging their heels. I don't know how to say dragging their heels in French, but my household is chomping at le bit.
Look,
to get back on the mic.
You're free to do whatever you got to do, man. If you need to finish the series, go for it.
I cannot. I have to be present. God. Okay, good. So we're going to do that. Great. That just made my day.
Next week, we will do it.
Okay.
Okay, so let's wrap it up there. Nice to talk to you.
Have a great week, Branskis.